Okay, welcome everyone. Yeah, it will be cool if you can show your videos, but if you don't want to, if you're shy, that's fine. We are sitting in a small little wine shop called Furny's. It's a wine deli, and it serves food. And I've been working closely with Wayne in doing tastings and where I can helping him with the wines. They're away, but Murray's here. We've got about 15 people in the room, which is great.
People. I can just see you. Show them the people, Harry.
I'm joining from my phone.
Yeah, this is how everything goes crazy, because yeah, just on that note, if you get the wrong wines, it's not Adam's fault. No, it's my fault. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so welcome everyone. Before we get into talking about Adam and hearing his stories, it's a fairly big moment for me, because this is the first hybrid session we've done. It's the 43rd Story Cellar session, and I know there's a lot of people that have joined on over time. The way that this started, and I've said this before, but maybe there's some new people on, is before the pure lockdown and COVID, when we were self-isolating, Craig and Nat sent a picture and they said, Harry, can you tell me the story? And through our discussion, we decided, why don't we just get everyone to buy some wines, and then we can get into the stories of those wines. So we got a list from Pick and Pay, and we got a list from Woolies, and that was 14 wines, and it lasted us for, I think we did one every 3 days, or every second day.
Desperate times, call for desperate moves.
Okay, so that's how it all started, and it's turned into a wonderful thing, and the crowd's grown, and it's been really good. We got the winemakers on, and we've had over 50, 55 winemakers or property owners on since that time. And you know, for me, it's great because I hear the stories, and it's helping me carve a niche out as a story collector, and then hopefully as a storyteller. It also helps, I hope, the producers or the artisans, because they're the winemakers, because they get to get their wines out there. Thank you for those who bought the wine. And then I know from a lot of the people on this group, from the feedback, it's been absolutely amazing about how that wall of wines when you walk into the shops isn't so scary, because you've got some personalities behind the brands, and that helps you. So this is going crazy, so I'm just going to switch it off. Okay. No, it's fine. It's good. It's off. Okay. So
You're not live enough.
that's the story, and the story. There's two things before. Two other amazing things about this session is that you will have heard me say that my philosophy around wine is that wine is a social tool, and it's been put on this planet, regardless of its price point, to help bring people together, to have conversations, to tell stories, and to sit around a meal. And that is my philosophy. And that philosophy was born out of my first visit to Spochwein. And Spochwein was at Tyrrell's place. And the original Spochwein, there were 4 of them. And we've had the other 3 on. I wanted to get Adam on, but you'll remember, for those that we had Paul van der Merwe from De Morgan's on. And then, as it turned out, Adam moved to De Morgan's on. So we couldn't do De Morgan's on again. But the stars have aligned, and we can get Adam on. And then the only people now, because
I left the Morgans on so that you could do the show.
So for me, the only person on the new Spochwein, because Miles joined, and then the Newton Johnsons. We haven't had the Newton Johnsons on, but
that was the one we had first.
That was the one that they asked to start off the whole thing, yes, on their deck, looking over the wells. Okay, so that's where we are. I would like to introduce Adam. Adam was the second winemaker at Klein Constantia since Rosgauer. The new Klein Constantia, there was wine previously, but it went dormant for a while. Now it's Matt Day. And from there, Adam moved on to Muldersbosch, and I'm going to let Adam tell the story about his winemaking and all that. I met Adam at Spochwein, and I also met Adam at a Caroline's tasting where we were tasting delicious wines. I can't remember which ones they were, but they were very nice.
Where did you meet me more?
At Spookville.
I think we did meet more at Spook.
Yeah.
And
And
a longer meet.
and Adam's wife Louise and Tyrrell and Annetta are the most hospitable people, because I couldn't remember many names after that tasting, but whenever I saw them at different events, they'd always come up and say hello. And Louise is a renowned artist, sort of Everard Reed gallery stuff. So I just wanted to, yeah. We'll get onto that when we talk. So anyway, this is Adam. The brand, Adam's brand is Yardstick. It's got a story to itself, and the brand in Yardstick is called Raised by Wolves. We'll get into that. So Adam,
Yeah, that's
Raised by Wolves.
Yardstick. Yeah. Yardstick is a little YS right up on the top of the bottle. The insignia, that's the company, and then Raised by Wolves is this particular range of wines that we're trying this evening.
So where do we start? So you were at Sandown with John Leenstra.
John Leenstra, he was supposed to be here tonight.
He was, yeah, he's in Joburg, and he said he's not dialing in because he's with friends.
No. I remember playing soccer with against John Leenstra. We had a soccer competition, and his old man had a company that had these portable toilets, and their soccer team's name was the Quick Quappers. And they had it red and white called the Quick Quappers. I think they beat us as well. And
I think
that was
Clayton would have also been a top Clayton dog plant.
Clayton?
Dog plant, wasn't he there as well?
Dog Plank? No, it doesn't ring a bell. But that was a long time ago, Harry.
So John has got a story where he was in Oz and he wanted to play rugby, I think. And they said, "What school did you go to?" And he said, "Sandown." And they said, "Okay," and they put him in the B team.
Yeah.
And then they forgot about him, and he went up and he said, "What's happening?" And they said, "Well, what school did you go to?" He said, I went to Saint Sandown. I said, "Oh, okay, cool." And then he played for the first team. So he calls it Saint Sandown. Anyway, Adam says you were in Joburg, and I think you were living elsewhere. You're born in Zim.
Do you want to hear the whole story?
The whole story.
The whole story from scratch.
Yeah.
Born in Zim. We immigrated to South Africa, to the deep south of Johannesburg, not the deep south of. So there's a Bez Valley. I was friends with all the Porters and the Leds. Grew up as we were a minority, like the ex-Zimbabweans were the minority amongst the minorities of Joburg. And then from there we went to Sydney, Australia for a couple of years, and came back. My father was petrified his sons were going to grow up to be criminals, which is probably true. So we came back to South Africa, ended up in Johannesburg again, went to Sandown High School. And then after high school, I traveled a bit and I worked in France as a porter in the vineyards outside Nantes. And from there, I came back to South Africa. I went to Wits for a year, studied BSc, got into Cellars, did my winemaking degree, and then I finished Muldersbosch in '97. And went back to France because I could speak French from my time there before. And between 1997 and 2000, I did what's commonly referred to as your journeyman phase, I guess. So it was just working harvests wherever I could, both in South Africa and abroad. So I worked at sort of Flagstone Winery when they started up. I worked for Bosch and Dahl, and then in the interim, I was working for a business in the UK called Direct Wines. And I did work all around the south of France, from Bordeaux all the way through to the border of Italy and Provence and that whole strip. That was the area that I worked in. And then, we came back to South Africa I got married. We got married in 1999, and I came back to South Africa to raise a family or to start a family. And then Ross Gower left Klein Constantia. And I thought, why not just throw your name into the hat? And because one of my earliest memories, actually, and this, when you get to the Semillon Gris, I'll tell you about it. So, as a kid in Zimbabwe, we drove all the way down from Harare to Cape Town, and our family visited Klein Constantia. And one of the earliest, when you think back to when you're a kid and you remember your earliest childhood memory.
First wine.
Well, for me, I don't know, like I didn't start drinking tea, but that's the first smell you can smell. One of the very first smells that I can recall smelling was the Cobra floor polish and the Brasso in Klein Constantia's museum. And they have those bedpans and those things, not the bedpans, where they warm your bed.
Yeah.
You don't polish a bedpan. And that smell is so evocative for me. It reminds me of the Cape. And it was so, I had this thing in my mind of a Constantia. It was very important as a memory for me. So you know, when Klein Constantia, when Ross left, it was like a dream come true for me to step into his shoes.
It's right to say Ross is a legend.
He was. I mean, he was a household name in South Africa. I mean, what he did at Klein Constantia really helped to.
How long was he there? He was like
20. No. So they bought. I think the US bought it in 1980, and I started in 2003. So Ross had been there from 81 right up until 2003. So it was a lifetime of his career, lifetime, basically the best years of his life. That was Klein Constantia. I got to work with Muscat de Frontignan. I got to work with Van der Constance. I got to work in an environment that was just, I'm very drawn to the, you know, wine is not just about a beautiful beverage. There's so much more to wine. And I think that's what makes it such an interesting thing to drink, because it's cerebral. And it connects us to, I mean, you spoke earlier about how it connects us to people, but it also connects us to our own, like, you know, like from like our identity, civilization, our kind of cultural roots. So traveling and drinking wine is amazing, but for actually to be in South Africa and to work at Klein Constantia was amazing. That's the cradle of viticulture in the southern hemisphere, actually. You know, it's older than the vineyards of classified Bordeaux, you know. So it was a big moment.
What must have been terrifying is that, and Ross has probably cut his teeth, is that the Van der Constance at Klein Constantia and at Klein Constantia and at Besenverwachting actually is paying tribute to a wine that put South African wine on the map. You've got this wine that is prestigious. In fact, we've had 2 auctions of this wine from 1820. The first one went for $500,000 for a bottle, and the second one, there were debates as to whether it would be high or low, went for $1 million. So these are the wines that we're talking about. Adam from Sandown's coming out to make Saint Sandown.
Yeah.
Is coming to make it, and
yeah,
that must have been daunting.
It was petrifying because I was a complete unknown, and so when I joined, I mean, it was difficult. Ross, I think there was a bit of he didn't exactly leave kind of
notes.
Yeah, there were no notes. There was no leather-bound kind of record of how to make Van der Constance. I had to work it out myself, and it wasn't easy. But there were people who came from all around the world to visit Klein Constantia, just to come and have a look at the old ledger. They still have a ledger that was there from when the British occupied the Cape, and they were selling Constantia wine. There were columns, and the prices of the different wines were all noted. And it was fascinating. I remember the one time a historian from Boston, she came to Klein Constantia specifically to show Lowell a letter that had come out of her family's kind of closet somehow, some old sort of inheritance. And it had been a relative, a great-grandfather or someone who'd been visiting the Cape at the time of the French Revolution, and he'd made the most amazing note, like descriptor of the Constantia wine that he'd drunk, and then had sent this letter home that had said, and I believe I hear rumblings of awful kind of catastrophe in Europe, and he's referring to the French Revolution.
No,
so I mean, these are the kind of commonplace kind of visits that you had. He's like amazing things. So. To kind of combine culture, history, and wine all in one place, I think it's hard to beat a place like Constantia, whether it's Groot, Klein, or Baton. I think there's a lot of jockeying now to kind of take precedence amongst those producers who actually owns the right to kind of that IP. But I think.
Can I tell you something on that though? They've got the Constantia wine route now. I was lucky enough to be asked to try and tell the story of Constantia. But what was important for me then is that the producers, 8 of them, not all of them, but 8 of them are working towards a common platform. And I think they are trying to keep themselves different. but they're definitely working towards the greater good or the brand Constantia.
Well, there was one big farm in the sort of when was the grant 1685. It was one big farm called Constantia, and you know, it was, I've got to think back now, but it was Cluter.
After Simon van der Stel split into three.
Yeah, and then there was Cluter, and then he had like 7 sons, and it was split up, and then so everyone actually has some in that area where the original boundaries of the Constantia farm are. It's quite easy to trace it back to actually who has legitimate claim to that story. But we're not here to talk about Klein Constantia.
No, we're here to talk about you.
But it was a great time. It was an awesome journey. And during that time, I met Peter Tempelhoff, and Peter Tempelhoff was the executive chef for the Liz McGrath collection. So he was based up at Cellars Hohenhort, and I can't remember. We originally met. We were put together by Lee Robertson. She's like a food and wine sort of writer. And she connected Pete and I. She had a feature in the magazine that she was writing for where she paired a chef and a winemaker just randomly. And the chef would come, it was like, imagine this, a chef walks into your kitchen, opens your fridge and your pantry and goes, okay, what have you got in here? I mean, how many of you would feel comfortable with that? I don't know. Especially towards the end of the month. You know?
I'd feel fine.
Yeah, and then Pete made this amazing meal at our house and they wrote about it. That was how we met. And then we discovered that we lived down the road from each other. We struck up a friendship. And then every time Pete needed wine for a special function at the Cellars, he would give me a shot. I'd go down into the cellar and draw a little sample of Klein Constantia or whatever the case may be. And we had this lovely kind of rapport. I was fascinated by what he was doing in the kitchen. And he was also fascinated by what was happening in the winery. And so we decided to start making wine together. And that was the beginning of Yardstick. So what he sort of was quite clear about was in 2009 when we started working together, there were very few examples of Pinot Noir that were bright, fresh, unoaked, just live, delicious, sort of fresh examples of Pinot. I mean, think about it. In 2009, there would have been people like, I mean, nothing like against the wines, but they're of a style. You have Glencairn Pinot Noir always was a bit of a showstopper. It was a big style. Friesenhof, you obviously had Hamilton Russell and Bouchard Finlayson. You didn't have the range of Pinots that you have today. And Pete was struggling to find that for his restaurants. So we decided to start making Pinot Noir together. And
you started with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir was the very first. So the very first vintage was grapes from the top of the Otaniqua Pass, from Herald, the farm Herald. And Miguel Chan, actually, who was the sommelier at the Cellars Hohenhort, took his little Corsa Bucky and drove that thing all the way down the Otaniqua Pass with half a ton of grapes in it. I remember he arrived at Klein Constantia sort of like midnight, and we had to unload these things and process them before the next day's work could start. But that was the beginning of it. And from there, we just started making a little bit of wine together. And then I left a couple of years later to join Muldersbosch. Yeah, which was another story. So that was like a one chapter close, another chapter opened. And
did you carry on with Yardstick?
I did. I took Yardstick with me to Muldersbosch, and then I foolishly sort of accepted a partnership with Muldersbosch, and they became partners in the business too. And I say foolishly, but in retrospect, I mean, obviously at the time I was so excited to have a business that had brand. Capital and that was going to put money into the business. But I think I was a bit sort of young and naive, and it just didn't. The idea was that I would make the wines and that they would sell the wines, and it didn't work like that. It's a lot more complicated than that, and it was much more complicated than I thought it would ever be to be the identity of a big brand like Muldersbosch, which was very visible, and understandably was paying my full salary, and they wanted the kind of the airspace, and also to do justice to the creative side of Yardstick, which was something that I felt deeply passionate about and wanted to be able to really make wines that mattered. And it was very difficult to divide that energy. So it didn't ultimately work out the way I had hoped. It was also difficult because Pete was, sorry.
It was Yardstick your partnership with Pete.
Yes. Yeah. So Peter and I started the business together. And then like a year or two after joining Muldersbosch, Pete being in Constantia, me being based in Stellenbosch, it was no longer convenient to just like catch up over lunchtime and to discuss ideas, it became like a real mission. So we decided to kind of dissolve that relationship, and then it was just a relationship between myself and Muldersbosch.
And I'll tell you something, because going back to those times, it was just Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, I remember, and there was nothing that spoke to Raised by Wolves. We'll tell that story.
I'm building up to the crescendo.
The crescendo. He was actually raised by wolves, but so before, at some stage, I want to find out about your family and your story.
Just ask questions, man.
Okay.
Cut in and ask questions.
No, we'll get it. Okay. So when did you get married? How many kids? Do you surf like everyone else in Spokane?
Okay. Got married in 1999 at we had our reception at the no. I want to say the Cellars Hohenhord, but it's not. It's down the road from Klein Constantia, the old Tutti. No, geez, I can't believe it. Did not be watching that.
Okay, we'll just edit that.
Constantia, I forget the name.
We're going to edit that.
And yeah, I have 3 daughters, and I don't surf, although I've tried it very hard my whole life. The best I can do is I'm like an assistant coach at Nippers for my youngest daughter, for my sons. So yeah, that's my efforts, my surf beachy efforts.
Do you go to the Vintners Classic?
I don't. It's actually on this weekend. It's on this weekend. I've never been. I believe it's a proper scope.
I'm going to tie into the Vintners Classic because we've had Triz on, and Triz was your assistant. So she was your assistant at Klein Constantia. So you were cutting your teeth together.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Triz was an amazing energy. She came in one day with her CV, and I thought, like, I can't work with this person. It's distracting. Really gorgeous, like amazing, like strong, confident, intelligent, like intimidating. Actually, you know, I was trying to like just find my place there, and this girl walked in, and you know, it was crazy. I did make a faux pas though, because there was a friend of mine who was also working, and her and Triz knew each other, and they both stayed in the same house, and there was a bit of friction in the house. There was a bit of like vying for, and at one point, Triz stormed into the office and said, like, "What's the story here, Adam? Who's going to be working here, me or Karina?" And I just said, "I don't know. I think we should have a mud wrestling competition, and whoever wins." And as I said it, I could just see Triz just going red. I was joking. She didn't take it as a joke. But yeah, I think she went to Anvilka pretty soon after that. She did. But we were in the same tasting group today. We still remain friends.
And Anvilka is a Klein Constantia brand. Three daughters.
That was the other thing I want to say about Triz. Sorry, was that there were baboons on Klein Constantia. And Triz, you must forgive me. This is a great story. So there was this little cottage where they lived, and I had a proper baboon problem there. And I remember the one day Triz walked in, and she's like, "You'll never believe it. Our house is a mess. I think the squirrels have got in." True story. It was asked you about the squirrels at Klein Constantia and Sunday It's very disruptive. Sorry.
Okay, so and Louise is an artist.
Is an artist. We met at Stellenbosch. She was studying fine art. I was studying winemaking, and we met in the Nielsee. Yeah, and she asked me for a chip.
What's the Nielsee?
The Nielsee.
I didn't go to Stellenbosch.
Did you not anyone who did Stellenbosch? The Nielsee is like the student.
These are all stand-up boys.
No, my friend is Stellenbosch.
Like figs, where you're gonna have meals.
You know the Nielsee?
Yeah.
My cousin.
Yeah. Have fun memory. The student union.
But I read from there you went back to Joburg because she was showing her art in Joburg. Everard Reed there.
Yeah, no, look, my mom and dad live in Johannesburg. We visit, but I've never sort of left since high school. I haven't really lived there. Yeah, since varsity rather, first year of Wits, moved down to the Cape. Yeah.
So, what made you decide? You're sitting at school. You're getting beaten by the crappy crackers, quick quappers.
Yeah.
What made you decide wine is the thing that you want to get into?
I've often really like, I often ask myself that, and I can only, like, the connection I have is to plants. So I grew up loving plants. I would spend my weekends gardening. That is like my happy place.
At 18?
No, it's like all my life. I love gardens. I love plants. That's where I spend my spare time. And so for me, like, wine is an extension of a plant. It's the logical extension of gardening. I mean, you can grow tomatoes and you eat them. You can grow flowers and you can cut them and look at them. You can grow grapes and you can store it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. It tells a story that's just it's a phenomenal process. You can't top it when it comes to like looking at a plant. It doesn't get better than making something like wine from it, in my view. So I think the connection, that was always the connection for me, was plants. And I have a fascination with process. So I love taking a raw ingredient and turning it into something that's much more than the kind of initial.
Not my process for packing the wine.
No, like, no, it doesn't matter if it's flour turning into bread or no, not that. No, that's not my idea of fun. Whether it be meat and curing it or whatever. I like taking a raw product and turning it into something that's sort of a process. And there's a mystery in wine. There's a science to it. It touches so many different levels of it's creative, but it's scientific, but it's empirical. You learn by like trial and error. I like to learn with my hands. Do stuff, make a mistake, do it right the next time.
Did you regret BSc?
Not at all. There were certain times during BSc when I very much regretted it, like organic chemistry and Afrikaans as a safety. It's not easy.
Did you do it in Afrikaans?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, and so my Afrikaans wasn't great. I mean, having grown up in Zim and lived in Australia and gone to like Johannesburg and Sandown, not a lot of Afrikaans. So Stellenbosch was a challenge, but it was almost like it was very much a cultural journey. Because I hadn't really been exposed to Afrikaans culture in my life, and it's just such a great culture on so many levels. And I kind of have an affinity with it, and I made an effort to speak the language. And having sort of worked in France a bit, the best way to experience culture is to learn a language and to get into under the kind of surface of stuff. So I just saw it like that. For me, it was okay. Learn the language, understand who your people are that you're surrounded by, and get to know people, and that was a lot of fun.
Or build your tribe, which is
build your tribe, totally. And I mean, agriculture is this is a good
segue into Spookfan and those guys and your mates in the wine industry, because whether these guys believe it or not, Adam actually is quite a legend. So for anyone who's doubting, I'd like to put that to rest right now. But
I haven't made it clear enough already.
Yeah. So the likes of Tyrrell and Sebastian and
Artie, Miles, Bevan, who we forgot?
There's many more.
It was 6 because there's a box of 6 bottles of wine. You got 6. So spook means proud or boast. You probably remember this from Tyrrell and everyone who's spoken it. Doesn't other was spit. But that's because I'm not Afrikaans first language. That's spook. The spook is to boast. No, spook. And it was actually Tyrrell's, I think it was Tyrrell's suggestion, spook man. And so I'll tell you quickly how I met all of those lads. So when I was in France in 1998, I think it was, or 97, I met Artie.
But that was through Constantia.
No, that was after studying.
Oh.
Artie was working at Angelus. And he stayed in this little place in Saint-Emilion, and there were a couple of South Africans there with Riani Stradom and Artie and Bolle Gerber, and I forget who else was there. But I met Artie then. I remember meeting Tyrrell and Bevan sort of later on in life. Miles had always been like this irritatingly good-looking kind of younger student who had a 2nd degree in geology. He just was like God, and it was just frustrating to have it. So that was Miles. Eventually got to meet him and like him and have a friendship with the guy. And who else? And then who we missing there? Sebastian Beaumont was Sebastian was like a hippie from Yardstick, from Elsenburg. And I remember Louise's good friend, who was also a hippie, had known. No, it was actually wasn't Aneta.
Not Aneta.
No, Tamu. You don't know Tamu. Tamu and Sebastian knew each other from like old Stellenbosch days, And Tamu introduced me to Sebastian, and I just like, yo, what a great guy.
It's hard to not like.
And he just didn't fit the mold. He didn't fit the mold at all. I mean, he was like a really kind of free-spirited, left field kind of guy studying at Jurassic Park. Or the College of Knowledge. There's a lot of nicknames.
So I want to go back to this first. It wasn't the first session of Spuchwein, and we have actually, for those people who said they thought it was spit, we've gone through this before in these sessions.
And I'm sorry, actually, I did forget to bring my Spuchwein shirt,
but
because we do have T-shirts. We got merch.
So So I'll tell you on the tours that we gave, we had all the Spuchwein wines. Spuch. I got into trouble with Miles. I got into trouble with Miles and everyone for pronouncing it incorrectly. But on our tour buses for people that are coming from overseas, we didn't say this is Audi Badenhorst or this is Adam Mason or whatever, Yardstick. We just had the names with a little string and a piece of cardboard which said Audi, Adam, Sebastian. And what would happen is that if the wineries weren't working out, or we found a particularly nice venue where they wanted to taste something like a Pinot Noir, the Yardstick Pinot Noir, which you can't really taste in Stellenbosch if you want to taste what a cool climate Pinot Noir is, we would just stop and we would set it all up and we would taste Adam. And I remember one thing, and I was editing the Justenburg session, and we were talking about where we would sometimes go to his warehouse to do a tasting. He's got a gramophone there. And so we're now tasting the Spuchwein wines there. And Adam walks in. And so we're all sitting at Tyrrell's house, place. We're tasting all the Shannons. And I'm going on about how nice these Shannons are until Adam walks in and he categorically says that his Shannon is the best out of the.
I would never say something like that. I'd say it's the last.
It's the last, which makes it the best because you're all drunk. But it was. So this camaraderie, and I remember chatting to you about it. I'm saying we need to get these wines out in a different way, and by naming them, you can get all the information. But by naming them by the people that are in Spuchwein, I look at Des because she's from Pretoria.
Yeah. No, but I mean the thing is, it is about just breaking the ice and having a familial environment to talk a bit of nonsense and demystify wine and break through all of the kind of snobism associated with wine. That was the idea of Spuchwein. Was you're amongst friends, so you can relax. You've got nothing to prove.
And it's a boast wine. You're boasting about this.
Yeah, but you're allowed to. You actually have permission to be a bit of an ass about your wines and to.
But you weren't showing your standard wines. You're showing your experimental wines. That was the idea. That's why you could brag about this. And we'll talk about that just now with the Raised by Wolves. What I want, okay, we're in Muldersbosch. Now, Adam worked 8-9 years at Klein Constantia.
Yeah.
8-9 years at Muldersbosch. So he's got track records at the places that he works.
Itchy after 8-9 years.
Yeah, it's the 8-9 years scratch.
The ego is
What
not
happened to
happy.
Yardstick?
Yeah. So what happened? Can I take that question?
Yes.
Okay.
You're the boss. I'm just the.
So basically, the Yardstick was this thing where I started at Muldersbosch. I started at Klein Constantia, took it with me to Muldersbosch, and then it became a lot bigger than I had always wanted it to be. I had always wanted it just to be something of a passion project, a creative outlet for me, and just something that I would have there as a backstop, as like a plan B if ever it needed to kind of work. And I guess yeah. So there was it was hard to manage that once there was another partner involved, and we made a lot of stock, and the stock wasn't sold as much as I would like to have been. And then at the time also, a lot of the focus from journalists in South Africa, so like probably like 2012, 13, 14, there was a real interest in South Africa. Jancis Robinson, Tim Atkins, Neil Martin, Greg Sherwood, who's a South African but lives in the UK as a master of wine. There was a spotlight on South Africa because South Africa went through a really difficult phase of getting accepted back into the global wine sort of world, or global, like it was a pariah state for South Africa. And there's a real kind of baggage associated with South African wines. And I remember going out in sort of 90s, like 97 to 2000 as a young South African winemaker. And it was hell because you could meet and work in the trade or whatever, thanks, Matt, with Aussies. And these guys are like seriously rough diamonds, you know. And their wines were good, but they weren't amazing. But no matter what they did or said, just especially the Brits thought these guys were just amazing. And it was hard because South Africans, and we tried too hard to kind of please. So we had this kind of issue of insecurity. We had to try and like compare ourselves to these Aussies, and it was difficult. We tried too hard, and often it was misplaced sort of pride came across as arrogance. So we actually shot ourselves in the foot in the public opinion for a long time. And I think what started to happen was a new generation of winemakers came through. There was a lot more traveling and a lot more kind of getting pegged down to size, realizing that actually we weren't that special, and broadening our palettes and broadening our experience and realizing actually that South Africa had so much to learn and so much to improve upon. And there was a realism that sort of crept into the story and a humility that wasn't there before. And it's a funny thing, but this started to kind of materialize as a sense amongst the press and the trade and the buyers out there. And actually South Africa became far more attractive than it had been previously. So suddenly you had a whole lot of journalists and wine lovers becoming genuinely fascinated by this human stories, by the regional kind of difference, by the different varieties. And then you know starting to talk about things like Old Vine projects, the work that Russia Kriya did, the work that Ibn Sadi, the phenomenal kind of ambassador that he is for South African wine. All that sort of stuff started to infiltrate, and South Africa suddenly became attractive, and in a completely easy way. It wasn't forced. I'm telling you all of this because the wines that I was making were all about blending wines from different regions. So I wanted to make a style of Pinot that was light and bright and fresh, a style of Chard that was kind of lean and steely and quite classic. But these were all wines that were sourced from places like Achterwitzenberg, Elim, Elgin, kind of cool climate sites. And they were not speaking of regional identity. They were blends. They were concept wines. And it was just the wrong time. So I felt like I personally felt that the wines were very good, and they were well made, and they had a real kind of place. But there was just no takers from I wasn't getting they weren't getting the attention that I felt that they deserved. And that's a very egotistical thing to say. I mean, it's difficult to distance the ego from wine.
Is this Yardstick?
This is Yardstick. Just talking about Yardstick. And I'm getting to why I raised what we'll start with. So then I realized actually what journalists really want to know about and how to kind of, because, okay, go back a step. How to sell wine is to get people talking about it. It's not to pander to the ego's need for assurance. It's about getting people to recognize that getting people to understand that the wine's there, it's available, it's for sale. And if you're not getting spoken about, it's really difficult to sell your wine. So that was the kind of the thing that I was trying to unlock. And then I thought, okay, I'm traveling to Pickenierskloof, Achterwitzenberg, Elgin, Elim. I know all of these growers. I've been working with them for so long. Apart from the Pinot and the Chardonnay that these guys have got, they've got amazing varieties that's not like the Meunier or high altitude Chenin, high altitude Chardonnay from the Pickenierskloof. So I thought, okay, well, why don't I start focusing on these single varieties from really spectacular sites with really amazing stories to tell. And the alter ego can have an alter ego. That's what Raised All Rules is. It's like, okay, I tried the Yardstick route. That was like too mainstream. I'm gonna try something a little bit more kind of esoteric and really like left field.
And why the name?
No, okay, this is it. I want this story because I've heard it from 4 people.
But which one have you heard?
From everyone that's spoken.
We want the truth now.
No, this was
So
the
really
truth.
the truth. So the truth.
How much wine had you all had?
No,
That's what I want to know.
No, that's the truth. The truth is, I was actually with a guy, an Australian dude, and I was selling wine at the time for Muldersbosch. I was on a trip to the US to promote Muldersbosch, and I was just this notion of like, how do I get these wines into the public arena and kind of spoken about? And then like I was talking to this guy, and he actually worked for Wines of Australia. He was a really like very, very switched on young guy.
Philippa Mitchell will know. She worked at Penfolds.
Okay, well he was, if I could remember his bloody name, I'll tell you. And I do have it in the back of my mind somewhere.
Like a date of your
But we ended up, and I love New York, because New York is amazing, because you go out in New York, you go out until like 5 o'clock in the morning, and you can go and have the most amazing food, and like these restaurants are open until like all hours of the morning, and it's just like an amazing experience, cultural, food, wine, blah blah blah. So we've been out all night, and I think I was starting to whine a bit about this issue of mine. And this, I said, like, the problem is, doesn't matter what the fuck you do, and you can like, no matter like how long you skin ferment it, you got some hipster telling you that he's fermented it for like a month longer than you, or he's picked it a month earlier than you, or his vines are 20 years older than yours, and I was going on like this. It's like, mate, why don't you just tell them you were raised by wolves? It's actually not a bad call. And of course, being like a good son of the African soil, my thoughts turned to Rudyard Kipling, and I was like, I do like this. I can use this story. I like the whole idea of the strength of the wolf pack, and you know,
the alpha male. So you need a pack to be able to come up with a wine in the bottle.
You do, and it speaks to that. So the whole idea of like a wolf pack. So there are a couple of layers to it. And when I started to think about it more, I liked the different layers that it had. So first of all, for me, a wolf in mythology, and a wolf represents the dark side. Often it is the kind of the alter ego. Yeah, or not necessarily the evil, but just the alter ego. The other dark, it could be evil, but I mean. Yeah, within us, we all have that, right? The shadow self, 100%. So there was something that appealed to me about like wines from Muldersbosch, but these are actually the alter ego, and these are the ones I really want to make for myself, because I'm really curious about these sites and varieties, and that really turns me on making these wines. So that was the first thing. The second thing was exactly as you just said, Harry. Like they said, it takes a village to raise a child. Making wine is a pack kind of pursuit, and it's a jungle out there selling wine. It's a dodgy business. You know, if you don't have people, you know, either in the trade who back you, or your mates who kind of vouchsafe your kind of, if someone talks badly of your wines, can like support you or gives you a good word at the right time. You know, all those things help to kind of keep your reputation and to help you sell wine. So it is definitely about your pack. And then the third thing was Rudyard Kipling's in his poem, the wolf pack. No, is it the story? What's it? The pack? I forget the name of the poem. I really should know this, but it's not. It's just like it's a reference. It's not centered around it. But he speaks of how wolves live and die by a code in the jungle, and if they obey certain rules, they will prosper, and if they ignore the rules, they're likely to perish. And he talks about hunting at night, hunting as a pack. The strength of the wolf is the pack, and the strength of the pack is this law runneth forward and backwards. This is the law of the pack. The strength of the wolf, the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. That's the kind of the gist of it. But I thought to myself, in making wine, you get taught a whole lot of academic stuff, theoretical stuff, which is really important. But there's certain basics in winemaking. There's certain rules that are really basic, and if you obey them, you can actually create a very, very kind of simple framework. And within that framework, anything goes, provided you stick to the basics. And that is really the essence of Raised by Wolves. Is that instead of like getting too complicated about wine, I thought let's just follow some very simple rules. First of all, the grapes. That's the most important thing. Where they're from, how old the vines are, what type of ground they grow in, how they're farmed. That's very simple stuff. It can be overly complicated, but in essence, it's about the identity of the grape. The second thing is just hygiene, like processing, just clean environments, keep it clean, work sterile, avoid excessive use of like unnecessary kind of additives and stuff like that. Preserve the identity of the grape. and common sense. I don't know what else. You know,
Passion.
Okay.
definitely. So there were a few basic things. If you just stick to that, the rest does look after itself.
So
In a nutshell, rose bubbles.
raised bubbles, which I think is amazing. I thought it was that you were sitting around with all those book wine guys, and they were telling you how natural the wine was. But when you told them that you're better than all of them.
No, actually, Ibn Sadi told me once that one of my wines smelled like the poo that sticks on a chicken's foot.
What?
Yeah, this is what you need good friends for, you know, to tell you when things are not looking good. So I always remember Ibn when I try this wine. And he was very specific about it. It's like, jy ken daai plaas hoender met die lang vere. Waarin die modder sleep. And he went into great detail. And I actually went, you're right. It does smell just like that.
Chicken.
Yeah. So actually listening to your mates is another rule.
Philippa's just written something, and she says, remember Game of Thrones, when the snow falls and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives.
I actually got thank you.
That's Philippa.
Thank you, Philippa. I actually got a mention on there was some thing in the New York Times once, I think, where they had like a whole thing of, because these wines were sold in the US, and the importers managed to get them in front of the producers for Game of Thrones. And actually they paired one of my wines with one of the characters. I figured it was. I've never seen Game of Thrones. No.
What?
Oh, she is.
I know, it's crazy.
How could you see Game of Thrones? You gotta watch it. It's amazing. As good as your wines.
I'm a cheap on Netflix.
Okay, so I just want to bring it back a little bit. So as Bev was saying, so Muldersbosch partnership.
Yes.
You've got this brand. You're there for 8 years. Tell us that journey and what's happening with Yardstick and what happened from Muldersbosch.
So the thing is, I mean, I'm very grateful to. I mean, Muldersbosch provided me with a base to make these wines. As the partner, they had the money to fund all of the grapes. I guess I was naive. You know, it's I'm not a businessman. I'm a creative. I'm a creative.
A creative married to a creative.
Yeah, our house. You should see that. Like, yeah, when it comes to tax season in our house, it's like a dog show. So I guess, yeah, like I say, I mean, it was just like I didn't know what I was getting into. It felt like a good idea to make wine, but then I hadn't thought of all of the other implications, like of how it's going to be managed and sold and all of the financial aspects of it. So fortunately, from that perspective, like Muldersbosch absolutely came to the party. But I guess, I mean, we did some great things at Muldersbosch. I think I was able to apply a lot of the kind of thinking behind single vineyards and the winemaking approach to some of the wines at Muldersbosch, which benefited those wines. The single vineyard Chennons, you know, the single vineyard Cab Franc.
What was that one called? It was it you or was it Tyrrell? It was a Shannon that came from one block, like a quarter of a block.
The Driehoek.
The Driehoek.
Yeah, but that was the one we had.
Was that the Driehoek?
Yeah.
So
but there's also one in Cedarburg called Driehoek or something.
Yeah. No. So I had the Driehoek. No, Driehoek. It was the name of the wine, but it was on the Yardstick, and I had that, and I remember loving it. And now the context, because we've just tasted some Shannon here. You wouldn't have found in your boxes. There's not much around, but if I taste that now compared to then, because I'm like I have got a little bit of a taste memory. I remember how beautiful that was. It was quite a pure wine, but with the age, it's really got this sort of whetstone, minerally kind of flavor to it. So,
yeah, I mean, I think it's classic Stellenbosch Shannon with a bit of bottle age.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, so Muldersbosch, it was I needed to move on. You know, I reached the point where
8 year, 9 year itch.
8 year, 9 year itch. Doing a lot of rosé to Sweden. We're doing like a couple of million liters of rosé into Sweden. Yeah, it was a big deal.
I didn't want to show.
It was like a sausage.
Muldersbosch Or Yardstick?
Muldersbosch.
Okay.
So when we go home
Harry's-
tonight, Adam's staying at my house tonight,
We're gonna drink
and I've got some
Muldersbosch
Mulderbush rose there.
It's a great drink. And I must say, yeah, the patio pounder is what the Americans call it. But I mean, I've got to say, so winemaking is a funny thing because you've got like the commercial reality of scale, which you have to survive. I guess in all businesses, unless you are like a single unit making things of massively high value. And it's sobering. Well, I don't know the bad use of the word, but I mean, you got to have that scale and that commercial reality to be able to afford to do the stuff that is
Indulge.
exactly. It's an indulgence. It is an indulgence.
So there's two
and that's
levels.
what Muldersbosch was. So that was the two, like the day and the night, the dark and the light kind of thing. It was like Muldersbosch was this realistic commercial thing that was highly successful, and I was getting paid a great salary, but I wasn't happy. It wasn't making me fulfilled.
Towards the end.
Towards the end, I got to the point where my energy ran out for it, and I remember the day I kind of finally went to the CEO and I said, I'm leaving. And he said, listen, I've pulled you back from the cliff so many times. I'm going to let you go in a nice way. And I think you just realize this is
a discussion that I wanted to have with you now. So
in front of all these people.
Yeah. So this is important because if you look at France, and you've been to France, if you look at the south of Rhone, and you get the Côte d'Aron's wines, they are commercially produced, they're mass produced, and they make quality wine.
You're talking Languedoc-Roussillon.
Yeah, there, but also even
that's the big one.
the southern Rhone, where you get a Côte d'Aron, which
like
is mass produced, like a Perrins, one of those.
Even Chapoutier and
those guys. So they make a wine. It's not expensive. Actually, you could buy it probably for what you would pay for an upper end SMG that you.
And they're delicious wines.
And they're delicious wines. South Africa. What South Africa's lacking is volume production of quality wines. And because we've been dominated by carbs for a long time. And when you look at now, since post-apartheid, the quality of wines, you're getting quality wines that are volume based. And I look at Muldersbosch, I even look at Warwick, and I know Spear. These are the people that are doing it, and we're starting to do it well. Klein Constantia has won best winery in Platters without winning a category. And you've got
Man Vintners is doing a pretty
Man
job.
Vintners, so you've got Trill with Man, they're winning wines. So you've got this, and that I think and this is the question, for South African industry is a great thing because we're not dealing with crop wines that don't have an identity and they are a mismatch. We've got wines that are made well, they're just made commercially and they're accessible.
So what's the question?
Is this where we should be going, South Africa for wine?
I think you need it. Like, I mean, you have to have both ends. You've got to have really high-end commercial.
We spoke about this driving here, and it was all of 2 minutes because we should have walked. But but the question was, we're talking about the Yardstick wines, and we're going to get into that now because Yardstick was put on hold. But if you really want to have a passion project of Yardstick, you want to make these wines that are your heart and your soul, what is going to be the stuff that you make that will allow you to do that? Because heart and soul in wine is very hard to sell. That's what you told us.
Hard to sell.
And it's very hard to become profitable. And if you look at the wine industry, only before COVID, only a third of them were profitable. So
it is possible. I mean, you've got examples of people like Duncan and Triz.
But Triz has got a huge.
She's got the commercial end of it.
She's got a huge volume section that supports it. Yeah. You've got Savage. You got Savage. You've got
and Triz also does a lot of big volume wines. But I think that was what kept her going for many years. But anyway, to answer your question, which was the question, big and small, you need them both. There's a place for them. I think, especially in terms of getting a footprint, this is the thing that generic marketing bodies always kind of work around is what's the perfect balance between having a very kind of entry-level commercial footprint to have wines in Tesco, Safeway, all of the big supermarkets, Costco, to attract the consumer to South Africa, but not to undermine the perception that South Africa only represents cheap entry-level wine. to draw them into the fact that there's a story to be told at the top end where people expect there to be more real kind of gritty information and stories. So you kind of draw them at the bottom end, but then you hope that they're going to trade up. And that's the thing where you need the quality has to be there at the bottom end. It can't be dross. It's got to be really good.
Dross, I haven't heard that.
It's got to be really good. Good, it's a good word. Dross. Dross. Dross is like
it's like guff.
that chicken feather that's trailing in the. That's dross.
So okay, so listen, we've been going for an hour.
And we still haven't actually got to raise the watch.
So
Let's move this thing on over
we're
here.
going to move on. We're going to move it on. The things I want, let's talk about your range of wines.
Yes.
I would like to say that for Adam, we sold more wines than we've ever sold ever. Thank you, everyone. Can I just say that you bought some exceptional wines?
I hope everyone got what they asked for.
No,
I
so
want
people,
to go one.
no, it's in my boot.
Because I've got to say, packing with Harry
I
was.
don't know what Harry packed.
Harry is a great packer. Harry Packer. You can call him Harry Packer.
Can I just say we offered in the box of wines. We're going to get onto all these wines now. But in the box of wines, we offered 2 Semillon Gris. Semillon we know from Constantia, but Semillon Gris got a pink skin. Meunier, which is the variety, it's the 3rd variety large.
Not to be confused with manure on the chicken.
It smells the same, but it's and then old school, which pays tribute to the 70s and 80s, where
That's my story.
that's your story. Okay, so
That's still my story.
but what I'm saying is that we ran out of the old school. We ran out of the old school. No, I was very good on. I'm not very good on the process side, but on the stuff when people said, "Okay, you've hit here, you've ordered now. Can I give you a Shannon or can I give you something else instead?" I've filled those with cab salad, so we're all happy.
Harry was
You've got cab.
He's quick on his feet. Maneuvers.
No, you got old school. No, there's no more Shannon.
We all get Shannon.
I know, but I like.
Harry.
In order to, okay. Listen, we've got people on here, so let's just get onto the stories of the wines.
Okay.
Let's start with the lightest, the wines. We can talk about. Let's just talk about all of them. The Shannon.
So should we? But people who are there on the screen don't have everything that we have tonight.
No, not all of them have the wines.
So should we
anyway.
talk about what's in the box?
Stories and the stories.
So for the first up,
Yeah.
So we're going to do the Rose Bubbles Pinot Meunier. If you can see it nicely on the screen.
Yeah.
Pinot Meunier. If you look at the label, the one thing I thought was very necessary to do was to talk about the grape grower. Because if wine is always about like the winemaker. So I thought the grape grower is really important part of the whole process. So I decided to list the name of the grape grower on the one side.
That's nice.
And then on the other side, the winemaker gets a small mention.
Who's that?
That's me. And then, what I thought was quite, so the labels, I had a lot of fun designing the label, like working with the labels, because there's some thought that's gone into it. So there is the variety and the vintage, obviously, but then below that, at the bottom of the label, is the name of the vineyard. Every label, every wine has a name. So this is called Newlands. The Meunier is called Newlands. And it's actually a little bit cheeky. I anglicized the name of the vineyard, which is Nieuweland. And it's a vineyard in Stellenbosch. And it sort of overlooks Speer. And on the other side of the road, it looks onto Stellenbosch Kloof. But it's a hill and it's got a line of sight to False Bay. It's a very, very high quality. So it's right next door to Rien and Boschkloof. And this grower, Dion Joubert, farms the whole farm for the Roux family. So the Roux family's original farm is called Flottenberg. So where the Van Rijn distillery is, Flottenberg, that was all one site. And Dion Joubert farms the vineyards. And they grow Meunier for Distel to use in some of the sparkling wines, the Method Cup Classiques that Distel makes. Now I discovered this variety having never worked with it before. And then at Muldersbosch decided to make a sparkling wine. I do like making MCC. Once again, it's about the process and creating something kind of from all these different components. But the one thing about Meunier, it has Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, when you pick them early for base wine to make a sparkling wine, because when you make a sparkling wine, you pick the grapes at a very low sugar level, so they've got a very high acidity and nice, healthy pH, and it makes for healthier, a better sparkling wine. But when you taste the base wines, they are very, very acidic, and they're not pleasant to taste. Pinot Meunier, it's a Pinot variety. It's got a red skin, and it ripens very early, and it has a very low acidity actually. And I mean, I didn't know that at the time, but whenever we tasted the base wines, the Pinot Meunier was like, I found myself just knocking the stuff back because it was so delicious. So I thought, like, well, why not make a wine from it that's not a base wine for a sparkling wine, but just a wine. So that's why the alcohol in this wine is 11%. Okay, at 11%, you would expect the acidity to be searing, but it's not. It's just beautifully balanced. So there's something about the texture and the character of the wine that really appealed to me. It's savory. It's this has got umami written all over it, which is a character that I really love in wines. And vinous is the word that I use to describe this wine. And vinous is often
So light.
It's light, but it's got a depth to it. It's not light and kind of simple.
Yeah.
But I think often vinous is used as a slight diss. Vinous means it's got no real character. But I use vinous in this sense because I believe it has really subtle character and sort of nutty, fine characters. So that's the Meunier, and it was never intended to be that color. Having not worked with the variety before, I wanted to make a white wine, like a Blanc de Noir, basically, from the grape. But when I pressed the grapes, the color that came out was so dark, and that's what ended up in the bottle. And people were saying to me, "So what is it? Is it like, what are you going to call this wine? Is it a white wine? Is it a rosé? I just said, just call it Meunier. I want it to just be called Meunier. That's what it's about, Meunier."
I don't know any other person who makes single variety.
And then Tim Atkins in 2017 gave this he voted this the best rosé of his annual South African report. So after that, it was a rosé, and it did make it a bit more simple to sell. The word Meunier, the word in Sol Meunier.
Yes,
Okay, it's battered, right? It's flour. So in French, a Meunier is a miller. And Sol Meunier is Sol that's been dipped in flour. And this variety, when you walk into the Meunier vineyard, from a long way away, it's got white leaves. The underside of the leaves have this flowery appearance. You can immediately spot it. So if the wind's blowing and the leaves are fluttering, it's got this white sort of underside. So that's where it got its name from, Pinot Meunier, like flour dusted Pinot. And it's a very kind of apt description of the vine leaf itself.
Are there many vineyards?
I don't know of many. I actually only know of this one. I believe that Simonsuch had a vineyard at one point. I'm not sure if it's still in the ground. They made a red wine from it in the 1990s. And I'd like to make a red wine out of this, simply because I can't stand calling it a rosé. The attention. And the color is actually quite beautiful. It's like an inky, really black and red. It's really quite stunning. And I'd like to get it a little bit riper because I think there's a bit more fruit flavor that comes out as it ripens. It's quite sort of austere right now because it is only 11% alcohol. But I mean, it's a textural one. I think for me, this is textural land. Yeah. And then last little bit of info on the labels. Each of the labels at the back of the label has a little 3-letter word code. I don't know if any of you have heard of what 3 words. It's an app. What 3 words is a location app. A couple of propeller heads got together and put a grid over the earth, a 3-meter square grid. Every single grid on the earth's surface has its own computer generated, randomly generated 3-word code.
No way.
Okay. So once that grid has been allocated that 3-word code, that is its code. So it was designed for emergency services. I've called an ambulance to a farm before where the roads ran out, and they asked me for my what 3 words location. Luckily, I knew what that was. I gave it to them, and they arrived right to where I was standing.
It's like a crypto one.
That is amazing.
So if you download the app and you go to that code, it will take you to the vineyard. So what I did was I went to the vineyard and I scrolled.
Can I read the code? Dudes, motorbikes, and smokeless.
Dudes, motorbikes, smokeless. So I basically, I chose it because I like all of those things. Like, oh, I was like, gosh,
I'm not an English
That was
teacher.
lovely.
So, Lovesick.
What?
Lovesick, refill, repost.
There you go. refill, reimpose. So every like what you go through the vineyards, you can. I just read the blocks until one appeals to me. I'm like, okay, I like this.
Okay, I did get a question. So
Yes.
I don't know if this is a. It shows in the Semillon Gris, or it's a wrong bottle.
No, it could be. It's a good question. The Semillon.
So the question, just everyone has the Semillon has a port scent. This is coming from Boris and Chanel, and they're asking, is that what it's meant to taste like, or is that a wine that's over? I don't know. I haven't tasted the Semillon Gris ever.
No, so that's a great question. Whoever posted that, thank you very much.
Boris.
Boris, thank you. It's a good.
Is that the Semillon?
The Semillon, actually. I was drinking the Semillon, talking about the Meunier. But it's a good segue into the Semillon. So in Afrikaans, let me go back a step. Semillon at one point was the most widely planted grape variety in South Africa. And it was so ubiquitous, so commonplace that it became referred to as groengrape, green grape. It was everywhere. And it was in the 1900s. I think it was like 80 to 90% of the Cape's vineyards. So you remember phylloxera in the late 1800s basically decimated the Cape's vineyard. And all of the different varieties that we had, we actually lost an amazing selection of planting material. So Constantia, we actually still don't know what was planted at Constantia. We know that there were muscats. We don't know which specific muscats were because we lost them.
We knew there was Semillon.
And we know that there knew there would have been stint, what we refer to as stint, whatever that was, we don't know. But those plants die. And so then new stock, and in areas like Gifberg and Skurfberg and all of the sandy, like Pickeneersdorp, where there were grapes planted there, they survived phylloxera because of the sandy soils. Then they were then used to replant a lot of the Cape. Semillon was widely available, and it was used to basically replant most of the Cape. So a lot of the old vineyards in this country are Semillon. There's a higher percentage of older vines. But it used to be called groengrape. Semillon also has a red variation, and it was referred to by the Boere gemeenskap as rooi groengrape. Okay. A little bit of Afrikaans humor in there. If you're colorblind, if you're rooi groengrape. So this is rooi groengrape. It's a natural mutation of Semillon. It's Semillon Gris or red Semillon, and it has a pink skin. Now, this vineyard is called La Colline. So on the bottle, it should say La Colline on the front. There you go, La Colline. It's owned by the Roux family, and the Roux family have been farming in Franschhoek for generations. Anton Roux is the guy who owns the farm currently. His grandfather planted this vineyard in the 1930s. And I was able to get a handle on some of the fruits. And I discovered that there was some red Semillon on the vineyard, and I asked them to pick it separately for me so I could make it separately to the groengrape. And then I thought, listen, it's a grape with red pigment in the skin, and that has to have some influence on the flavor of the wine. So the idea was to ferment it on the skins to extract the color. So the Semillon, the groengrape, I took it and processed it like a white wine, whole bunch pressed it, and just like nice, clean, clear. And then the rooi groengrape got some skin contact and extracted some of the color. So that's where this sort of burnished copper color comes from. But the oxidized note that Boris refers to,
and I can
does definitely, it's not made in the way that a white wine normally is made to preserve fruit aroma. It's been made in a slightly more oxidative style. So it definitely is in the oxidative spectrum.
And
it's intentional. But even beneath that, I think there's still some sort of fruits. I get kind of apricots and almost like there's even like a slight sort of guava character that comes through this. There is some fruit character that is still present, but there is much more tertiary oxidized character, and I find that quite intriguing. It's for me, it's a relic. I think of it like as an antique wine. It's something that's very old. It's
That's a very good
part
way
of
to
our
explain
kind of cultural history.
Okay, so we've gone
Yes.
Meunier. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Meunier. Meunier.
It's got spits and it's not Meunier. So, and then we've gone the Semillon Gris.
Yeah.
And then the next one that we had in the bottle was the old school.
Old school.
Now I like the old school. I had a Magnum of the old school on the weekend. It was fantastic.
All to yourself.
Beat that.
No, with friends.
So we're talking about the old school.
Yeah.
And the old school, as Harry started talking about earlier, prior to the wine of origin sort of legislation, which only kicked in the late 1970s, there was very little control over what was declared on a label and the actual contents of the bottle. So, for example, you were only required by law to have 25% of a variety in order to state that variety on the bottle. So many of the Cabernet Sauvignons of the 1960s and 70s contained only 25% Cab. The rest would have been things like Cinsault, Shiraz, and to a certain degree Pinotage. But
Later on.
but Cinsault really is formed a huge sort of a portion of that bulk of the wines that were called Cab.
We're talking about like Chateau Libertas.
Well, actually Zonneblum, Rustenburg, Lanzerac. So those wines today, if you look at like the auction prices of things like Rustenburg Cab, Lanzerac Cab, Zonneblum Cab from the 1960s, they fetch high prices and they're delicious wines. They've aged majestically. And so for me, that's a great story. So you've got this king of the red grape varieties, Cabernet Sauvignon, playing a kind of minor role in this wine that's aged spectacularly, thanks to the kind of contribution of this essentially peasant grape. Like it's a great South African story. And the thing is, the Cinsault has very soft tannins. It's got freshness. It's got a very interesting profile of fruit.
It doesn't have anything that says that it should be aged with.
No,
I mean,
it's contradictory.
Yes, it does.
It's absolutely counterintuitive. It's got very light color. It's got fairly low acid. It's got very like light tannins. But there's something there, and it's one of those things that like 1 and 1 makes 3. Cinsault with Cab is a very, very interesting combination, and they do complement each other. And that was the idea of old school, was to pay homage to these, which were for me. So all these wines are like 12.5% alcohol, the old school. I've always wanted to work with Cab. In this country, it's a real challenge to pick Cabernet Sauvignon at a modest ripeness level, and there's no greenness. So it goes back to finding the right vineyard. And there's a vineyard, so Bonnie-Mile in Stellenbosch is the site of the Cab vineyard. It was planted in the early 1990s. And basically, I found out about the vineyard. It had been sort of farmed with benign neglect. All of the poles and the wires were kind of frotting. It hadn't really been given any kind of herbicide. So it was in a nicely natural, balanced state. We cleaned it up, pulled out the wires, pulled out the poles. So eventually got these actually very nice freestanding bush vines, tiny clusters of very nice small berries. And then the Cinsault component comes from a very, very famous farm just on the edge of False Bay. It's called Rustenhof. It's owned by the Bredell family. It's one of the Cape's greatest sort of vineyards. So all of the A-list kind of winemakers will buy some fruit from there. The Molyneux have in the past, I don't know if they still do, Chris Allight, Bernard Bredell, John Seckham. I'm probably forgetting like other, the Cravens buy grapes there, Alex Dale. The thing is, it's so close to the sea, and so it's so exposed to the sea influence that you can. There's a line that runs down that road. It's a wire a fence, and when the wind is pumping, it starts to vibrate. So it kind of oscillates. It's eerie. It's a spooky place. It's very wind, and it's very sort of it's rugged, and it's this decomposed granite soils. It's all bush vine, dry land farmed. It's like if Scope had like a vineyard poster child, it would be bush vines from Rustenhof. Sauna di Bush. I see what you did there. Okay, so we've been going for a long time now. Just to wrap it up, just to say, okay, so that was Yardstick, and I know Adam moved on to De Morganson. For all intents and purposes, that didn't work out so well. But Yardstick as a brand, this is your brand. It's co-owned by myself and still Muldersbosch. Yeah.
What's the plans? Is it
The
happening?
plan
What's
is
going on?
hopefully after the session we'll sell out all the remaining stock. I'll pay off my loan accounts, and I'll be able to start from scratch. The crowdfunding exercise.
No, so
No, but the plan is to keep making these wines.
Yardstick is still on the horizon.
Yardstick is, look, I
It's not going well.
still believe that Yardstick, I still want to work with the vineyard that I worked with Yardstick. And I love Chardonnay and I love Pinot Noir. I love drinking it and I love making it. For me, those are like Chardonnay is my desert island variety. I could drink one variety for the rest of my life, would be Chardonnay.
Would Peter Timberhoff be involved in it?
Pete and I are good friends, but he's not involved in the business anymore. Ultimately, look, I have a partner who's someone who's come on board more recently with funding, and they're based in the UK, and they're like a value-added partner. So they actually can help sell the wine. They've got access to market. So I did learn a little bit over the last 10 years. So that's really it. It's about having like a partnership that works and both parties gain. You know. So
So your winery is a
no, I don't own a winery. I was employed by Muldersbosch, but I don't work for Muldersbosch anymore. This was all made when I was still at Muldersbosch, but no longer. I mean, so actually, what happened after I left Muldersbosch? I stopped making these wines. So in 2000,
you had to stop it.
So in 2021, I left Muldersbosch and I moved to De Morganson. And part of me going to De Morganson was saying, listen, this has been impossible to handle, too complicated. I'm going to stop making these wines. And I'm just going to focus on doing one thing and do it as well as I possibly can. A year later, I thought, I'm so glad that this company did not sort of get closed, because this is like, I need it now. It didn't work out at De Morganson for whatever reason. It was a year that just didn't go the way that I think either Wendy or myself wanted. And I started consulting. So in 2021, I left in Muldersbosch in 2020, and in 2021 in June, I started working for myself. And it's just like I've been hustling for the last year and a bit. It's actually a year and a month. And trying to get this program on the going again. So I'm working things out. It's basically like reinventing myself.
It's the phoenix, right?
Like the rest of us.
It's exactly the
and I think
thing.
it's this life, right? I'm
exactly
no
the
different
thing.
to anyone else. And it's been I must say it's been tough, but I don't regret a thing. I don't regret a thing, because I've learned more about myself and all of my kind of inadequacies and like areas to improve and strengths, admitting the strengths, but also like admitting like the real like the weaknesses, and like trying to make a plan that's going to work for the next 50 years, because we're all living longer, right?
But you see, so for me, this is the most important thing, because I definitely see the phoenix rising. I know that Adam's working, he's helping out Friesen North get their wines right, and a whole lot of other people. We're not going to get onto that. We've been going for a long time. Guys, thanks everyone on the Zoom. I hope you've managed to hear everything. Thank you very much for putting up with all of these guys that were so noisy. Thank you so much for coming and putting up with these guys that didn't say a word.
You muted them all, right?
I'd just like to say thank you guys, because the Zoom is still the most important part of this. It's the 43rd session, and it's been pretty cool. It's been, for me, yeah, it's cool. And what's even cooler about this whole thing for me, and I mentioned at the beginning, is that we had an original crowd, and that crowd's changed, and we've got new people, and we've got a broader reach. I had to deliver wines. Adam had to deliver wines to the Northern Cape, to the Eastern Cape. It's starting to happen. So I'm really
and I met Christina from Somerset West, and she was quite a trip. Christina,
is she on?
She'll be on tonight, definitely.
Yeah.
But can I just say something? I want to say something quickly about Harry, meeting Harry, and it quickly became apparent when I met Harry that he likes wine a lot. and you know, so we kind of connected a bit, and like so enthusiastic. It's so lovely to meet people who just like love wine and want to like know as much as possible, and you just can't tell them enough. And that was like my first recollection of Harry. And soon afterwards, then you know, I heard that Harry had started these started wine tours, and I got the call up to come and be a part of the one wine tour. And I thought, geez, you know, it's great that there are people like this, like punting the smaller producers. And I'm glad that I'm on a Harry's horizon. And then I heard that Harry had sort of got involved with the Cape Wine Academy. I thought, you know, it's so amazing that there's someone with this, you know, he's an accountant. He's kind of obviously numerate, and he's got a good head on his shoulders. And yeah, that's the problem with these people, right? And then like bringing that kind of rigor and his wine passion to like a really flailing institute, actually. I just thought, like, it's all about wine education and enthusing people with the story. And he got the thing about the stories. So I kind of I was a bit bummed to hear that he wasn't involved anymore when you left the wine academy. It was a while ago. But this endeavor of yours, Harry, I just think it's fantastic. I mean, it's so personal. And it's about a community. It's about a network. I mean, you know, everybody's this is your community, and you obviously got a lot of love and respect from the people who join into these podcasts or these sessions. And thank you so much for making it to finally getting the last bottle of six into the Spochwein box, brother.
We still need Bevan.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd just like to say, Adam, thanks. I've known Adam now for a while. When I had more questions than I had answers, and also, you know, I don't necessarily look at things in an ordinary way, especially when you're looking at things from the wine industry's way, which is a set way. I like to try and be disruptive and look at things differently. And Adam and the Spochwein guys really helped me in that. And as I said earlier, right at the beginning, my whole philosophy on wine being a social tool, that sort of unlocked everything for me. It really did. And we've got Cesar, who never drank white wine before, and now he drinks. I don't even know if it's because of Bev, but he drinks a lot of white wine. But thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This has been a special session for me. I hope it's been a special session for you and for you. I'm going to end this call now.